Good day everyone. Before I proceed, I am Edselle and Plata from BSIT 3A BPO, and today I am going to talk about the ethics and the law. But before that, what is ethics and law? Ethics is a branch of moral philosophy that guides people about the basic human conduct, and the law refers to a systematic body of rules that governs the whole society and the actions of its individual members. And based on the introduction of the ethics and laws are found in virtually all spheres of society. They govern actions of individuals around the world on a daily basis. They often work hand in hand to ensure that citizens act in a certain manner and likewise coordinate efforts to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. And let's proceed to the scope and objectives and also the learning content of this Module 5 entitled Ethics and the Law. The term law has its own complexities that cannot all be covered in this module. We will try, however, to provide you with a basic knowledge of what law is in general and what are some types of law that are commonly recognized. We believe that your understanding of the concept of law, just like your basic knowledge of ethics, is vital to your attainment of a firmer grasp of computer ethics. And after working in this module, you should be able to define law in general and explain its nature and apply its basic principles to a computer ethics. And regardless whether you accept it or not, law governs our society. In your own home, law governs the acts of each member of the family. In school, your actions are controlled by rules enforced by teachers and school administrators. And laws may be written or unwritten, formal or informal, rigid or flexible. And the new Constitution of the Philippines is an example of written, formal, and rigid type of law. And while the tradition or beliefs that governs community actions is an example of unwritten, informal, and flexible law. And in its widest and most comprehensive sense, law refers to an ordering principle or rule of action that people must be obeyed or conform to. It is also a rule of consecution or an order of sequence that people cannot counter without detrimental consequences. Any deviation or departure from law is frowned upon and is subject to punishment or condemnation. A rule of action, the law pertains to any regulation, precept, and a measure of precedent that governs any human concern, act or conduct, contract or transaction, and proceedings, inclusive of their effects. And an ordering principle, law pertains to norms that regulate and control actions. And also note that the rules of action is not only govern conduct and movements, but also dictate forbearance. This means that a particular law may either require the performance of an action or prohibit the commission of a particular act. And we have here the following example of rules of action that is applying to the foregoing to computer ethics. And we have here, first is the law of intellectual property. In intellectual property law deals with laws to protect and enforce right of the creators and owners' inventions, writing, music, designs, and other works, known as the intellectual property. And there are several areas. We have the patent, copyright, and also the trademark, and so forth. And then the second one is the law governing freedom of expression. In Article 10 of the Human Rights Act, freedom of expression, everyone has the right to freedom of expression. These rights shall include freedom to hold opinions and to receive and impart information and ideas without interference by public authority and regardless of frontiers. And then the third one is the statutes and laws promulgated by Congress. Statutory law, also known as statutes, is created and passed by the legislative branch of the government. A statute is a law that has been enacted by a legislature, which is the body that has been granted the power by a constitution to enact legislations or laws. When a statute is passed, it becomes law and therefore part of a statutory law. And then the fourth one is the presidential decrees and republic acts. A formal and authoritative order having the force of law. A presidential decree is a judicial decision or order or doctrinal act of an economical council. And a republic act is a piece of legislation used to create a policy in order to carry out the principles of the constitutions. And then the number 5 is the code of conduct or ethics governing professionals within a particular field or profession. A code of ethics and professional conduct outlines the ethical principles that govern decision and behavior at a company or organization. They give general outlines of how employees should behave as well as specific guidance for handling issues like harassment, safety, and conflicts of interest. And a rule of action does not lose its validity by a mere violation or even by repetitive transgression thereof. Laxity in enforcement or non-implementation of the law will not affect its efficacy and validity, being subject to amendment or repeal by the legislative authorities or by operation of law. However, a rule of law may either be changed or abrogated as the case may be and thus become unenforceable and ineffective. And then the next one is an order of sequence. The law pertains to any systematic arrangement or sequencing or consecutive progression indicating uniformity of a given set of occurrences. And the following are examples of order of sequence. We have here the first is the computer programming procedure. In procedures are followed step by step. The completion of each step is prerequisite to the next. And for example, a software or computer program cannot be produced without the computer programmer's execution of the design conceived by the following several programming steps that are requisites of the succeeding steps. Then the second one is the computer application. In computer applications of whatever nature, there is always a sequence of command and execution that constitutes the law in this case. For example, before you can use any of the various Windows applications, you have to click the mouse on your intended feature, which is tantamount to a command, and only then will the machine execute your order, and the whole process of a computer operations follow this sequential relationship between command and execution. And next is the difference of a rule of action and an order of sequence. The distinct and obvious differences of a rule of action and an order of sequence is that the fact the first is by nature relative, while the latter is certain or absolute. Then, there are different kinds of law here in the Philippines alone. We have political and constitutional laws, labor laws, civil laws, criminal laws, corporate laws, remedial laws, precedents or court rulings, among many others. These are part of the country's legal system. And the four of the most traditional concepts of law upon which most of our present legal system, including laws governing computer use, is based. there are four kinds of law belonging to the so-called non-jural sense. That is, law and rules in the idealist perception, namely divine law, natural law, moral law, and physical law. And these four, namely kinds of law belonging to the called non-jural sense, will be discussed by my group mates. And then, let's proceed. First is the divine law that Mr. John Michael Punzalan will discuss.
Good day, my name is John Michael Punzalan, 3A PPL, and I will discuss the divine law. Divine law. Divine law, it is general sense pertains to the entire system of faultlessness and perfection that God has initiated to govern the whole of creation, both living and non-living. The law of nature and all of the other laws, therefore, would fall under divine law as it encompasses and governs not only human action but also the entire universe. The blowing of the wind and whichever direction, violent stars of lightning, and deafening war thunder, heavy rains and thunderstorm. The heat of the sun, among others, are manifestation of the divine law. It is stricter sense, however, divine law encompasses the dogmas of religious faith that give emphasis on the reparation of sins and salvation, life, death, and life after death, heaven and hell, soul, purgatory, and eternity. The canons of divine laws are usually embroidered in religious doctrines and writing of different sects and religious denominations for Christians, and Holy Bible, consisting of Old and New Testament, contains the divine law. Similarly, the divine law is embodied in the Quran, the Upanishad, the Bhagavad Gita, and other religious doctrines. Unlike an ordinary rules of action, divine law is absolute. What is present about it is that mere intent of truth of violating it would be tantamount to transgressing it. Hence, even if you do not translate your evil thought in action, there is a great probability that you are committing a sin. For short, divine laws are law that believe to come directly from God. Divine law are those God has His grace since fit to give us, are those mysteries, those rules given by God which we find in Scripture. The example for the divine laws is the Ten Commandments.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Punzalan. And then the next one is the natural law that Mr. BJ Donato will discuss.
Good morning, everybody. My name is BJ Donato and I'm from the 3A BPO. Today I am going to report my part in ethics and law. I am going to report the natural law. What is natural law? Natural law is a theory in ethics and philosophy that says that human beings possess intrinsic values that governs their reasoning and behavior. Natural law maintains that this rule of right and wrong are inherent in people and are not created by society or court judge. Okay. Natural law. The traditional view developed by classical theories regards natural law as the unwritten law permitting and governing nature as rational harmony and orderly pattern of different things and events, without which the latter would be reduced to chaos and disarray. Note that this conception disregards the existence of God as the supreme being who, according to divine law, initiated the faultless and sequence of things and events. The notion of natural law is, in this sense, therefore is intertwined not with divine law but with the law of nature. Plato, the philosopher, distinguished natural law from the merely legal with according to him is an imperfect representation of the law. What is legal is not inherent and naturally just according to Plato. It becomes thus the only because it was enacted and institutionalized by society. On the other hand, natural law, like divine law, is absolute and cannot be abrogated by human act, unlike legal law. In this part, the natural law is the idea that there exists a body of universal absolute principle about positive law, or on the paper, the law that we normally think about. We were here, the word, where man-made law clearly violates this principle. It is invalid, or as the Latin maxim goes, lex injusta non est lex, an unjust law in no law to all. This idea that there exists a body of principle that humans can be used as standard for judging the validity of human law is stark opposition to the certain tenet of the legal positivism, which believes that the law and morality are separate. It asserts that a law that has being validly enacted by the competent authority is valid, regardless of whether some may deem it unjust or immoral. Thus, according to the legal positivism, even a law that is clearly immoral and is a clear violation of one's right and liberties is still a valid law as long as its authors have followed the necessary procedure in adopting. Let's move on to the next slide. Plato likewise regards natural law as a discipline that every human being must observe and adhere to, so that the individual and common good may be realized or attained. The precept of the natural law are righteousness, justice, equity, and fairness. From this precept, the principle of the law are delivered. The law that govern computing may very well be considered as being delivered from the natural law. This is because computer abuse, piracy, and plagiarism and pornography are human action that violates righteousness, justice, equity, and fairness. And Epictetus, other Greek philosopher, believes that natural law refers not only to the extrinsic or outward order of the things and events as physically observed, but also the inner and inherent nature of peoples as rational beings. The later conception of the natural law emphasized that people by nature have the capacity for goodness, righteousness, justice, and equity. Into this part, Plato also sees the natural law as a set of rules and orders that people should obey, so the righteousness, justice, and equity and fairness can be achieved. There are many human activities like excessive use of computer, pornography, plagiarism, and piracy that can violate the values which the natural law wants to achieve, so there were laws delivered to control those. And in Epictetus looks at instinct and extrinsic order of things as both concern of the natural law, as those things complete the holistic character of human beings. As rational thinker, to simplify, say, humans can think and reason out things clearly, but sometimes our thinking and action are affected or influenced by outside factors or events. Yung sa may last part ng Epictetus, ang halimbawa niyan ay alam mo naman na mali ang gumanti sa masama sa kapwa. Pero dahil nakikita mo na parang wala lang sa kanya, sa taong gumagawa ng masama sa'yo, yung ginagawa niya, nakikita mo na nasasaktan yung pamilya mo sa ginagawa ng tao na yon. Gagantihan mo na siya. Yung galit mo at yung nakikita mong epekto nun sa mga taong nagmamahal sa'yo, ang nagtutulak sa'yo para gumanti ng masama. Parang ganun. Okay, let's move on to the last part of my part. If you are fond of cartoons and have watched Shaman King, you will recall that the main character of the series, Master Yu, firmly believes that every person is good. Master Yu calms and unruffled disposition always wins the respect and admiration of the friends and even his opponents in shaman fights. And we can transform and tame even the fiercest of his enemies. We cite this example because in Epictetus' sense of the natural law, goodness is considered as a natural and inherent attribute of the human beings. Follow this notion, computer users or computer professional are presumed to have the integrity and discipline, the innate goodness that is expected of human being in general. Dito naman, di ba kasi sa natural law, sa'yo, so si Misteryo, naniniwala siya na lahat tayo ay mababait. And nagbabago kasi ang ugali ng mga tao depende sa nakakasalumuha niya, like depende rin sa mga ugali ng friends niya. So doon nag-start iiba rin yung ugali natin. Na-influence tayo ng mga taong nakapaligid sa atin. Parang may contribution yung mga taong nakapaligid sa atin sa pag-develop kung sino tayo. Then sa may last part niya, sa may following this notion, sinasabi niya doon na kayong mga computers user have to act professional na may integrity and discipline. Kasi yun din yung gagayahin ng mga nakakakita sa atin.
Okay, thank you, Mr. BJ Donato. And then the next one is the moral law that will discussed by Miss Mary Jane Agustin.
Good day, I am Mary Jane Agustin. So for today's video, I'm going to discuss to you what is moral law. So let's start. We must sometimes confuse moral law with divine law and natural law. There are, however, differences as already discussed in the earlier part of this module. Divine law in its strict sense pertains to the law of religious faith. On the other hand, that concerned with precept of good and virtuous conduct. Moral law is definitely not religious, relative to the natural law. Moral law has ethics as its foundation, while the first is founded on metaphysics. So let's move on to the next slide. Moral law consists of moral norms that are certain and dictate what sorts of behavior or conduct may or may not be expressed, or what sorts of act may or may not be performed within the particular community. It is a rule of generally recognized and desirable ethical norms and principles that control and rule human conduct. It is a system of unwritten ordering principles based on good and virtuous conduct that governs human action. Moral law describes what must be done to achieve the good or implies human nature. I have here the 6 examples of human action in computing that are considered as compliant with moral norms. First, we have respect for the rights of owner of intellectual property. Respecting the intellectual property of others means we obtain proper authorization and licensing agreement before using any intellectual property and strictly follow the terms of use. Because intellectual property is protected in law by copyright, patent, and trademarks, which is able people to earn recognition or financial benefit for what they invent or create. Second is fidelity in the utilization of information. Third is compliance with computer norms and law. It is organization adherence to the law, regulation, guidelines, and specifications relevant to its business processes. Number 4. Honesty is sharing of information, especially in chat room. Probably, the most important thing you can bring to your communication with your friend or partner is honesty. If what you're saying isn't true, then nothing real is being shared. Speak your truth as much as you are able to with clarify, love, and gentleness. Number 5 is integrity in creating computer programs. 6 is condemnation of computer crimes and abuses. Computer abuse refers to a broad category of activities wherein a computer is used improperly or illegally cause harm to somebody else of their improperty. Cyberbullying, hacking, identity theft, and even using word PC for personal business are all examples of computer abuse.
Okay, thank you, Miss Mary Jane Agustin. And then the last one is the physical law that we'll discuss by Miss Angel Abanto.
Now let us now move on to physical law. Physical law or law of nature is sometimes with natural law, which we discussed earlier. The two are not the same. The apparent resemblance of natural law and laws of nature, which a physical law, is grounded on their correlation with ordering sequence and uniformities of distinct things and occurrence that are relied upon as being constant and regular. Human beings and other living creatures observe the order of sequence and uniformities involved in the operation of nature. Natural phenomena are constant and regular and can thus be dependent upon the physical law. The main characteristic of physical law is, first characteristic is regularity. When we say regularity, it is regular because it becomes operative, its efficacy remains constant and unbreakable. Number 2, we have imperativeness. It is because permanent and unchangeable. Now remember that without constancy, regularity, uniformity, and imperativeness, an occurrence or corporeal phenomena cannot be regarded as a physical law or a law of nature.
Okay, thank you, Miss Abanto. And that's all for the 4 kinds of law belonging to the called non-jural sense.